Now, my friends, it is a bad day if you are an environmentalist wacko, if you are a environmentalist zealot who believes and worships at the foot of Gaia and the doomsday prophecy of the end of the world thanks to CO2. The government giveth and the government taketh away is what the environmentalist groups are discovering. This is from the Daily Caller, a conservative news organization. On August 18th, New York Times story detailing the hard times so sad for the nation's environmental groups in this second presidency of Donald Trump contains a clear lesson in the perils that come with basing an entire movement on crony capitalist federal policies, meaning the government is bullying the crap out of everyone, forcing people into technology that they neither want nor need, that tends to be crappier than the original. And so anyway, but that lesson is what the government giveth, it can also take away. Headlined, environmental groups face generational setbacks under Trump. Well, I guess then we're all doomed then because they said the world was going to end in 20 years. The story's writer bemoans the hardships now being faced by major environmentalist groups like the Sierra Club, the NRDC, Greenpeace, and other weirdos, I added that part, who have watched as the president and his team of disruptors have dismantled much of the Biden wacko agenda in just 8 months. Worse, they now face the horror of watching the EPA administrator Lee Zeldin go after the very foundation of the climate religion, their orthodoxy, and that was the Obama-era 2010 endangerment finding, which labeled greenhouse gases as an evil that the world must stop, which has allowed crazy lunatics, for example, to destroy cows because their belching is bad for the environment, and so much more. And this, by the way, would lead to tens of thousands of regulations that have strangled industry all over the United States, which, by the way, needs to go so we can free up our economy to once again be on the path of maintaining our place as the world hegemony. Now, one former Sierra Club president, Ramon Cruz, said the morale across the entire movement is destroyed, as members have watched their IRA subsidy-fueled house of cards come tumbling down. Because again, this entire movement has been propped up by government because these weirdos got themselves into government to go ahead and prop up their dream of controlling Americans. Because make no mistake, what climate change is really about, the zealotry movement, is control. Climate regulation, the solution to the world-ending disaster that's just around the corner, and has always been just around the corner for the last 40, 50 years, is more taxes, more regulation, more control, less freedom, because that's the only way to save the earth, don't you know? Anyway, things have turned so sour at the Sierra Club that the group's board of directors abruptly fired the executive director, Ben Jealous. Well, that is a name, Ben Jealous. Earlier... If that's a real name, man, those parents did not do him any good. Unless it's a they, them, I don't know. Anyway, early in August, after what was said to have been an extensive evaluation of his conduct, that move came after Jealous had taken the club through several rounds of layoffs amid struggles to maintain the money flows. Meaning the government was no longer subsidizing these weirdos and they were having problems. Now, much of the pain being felt by these alarmist zealot groups today stems from the provisions contained in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act phasing out green energy subsidies. Thank God. This stuff is retarded. We never should have allowed the government to force these industries. Look, if the technology itself was to get good enough to actually compete in a free market against oil and gas, I would have no problem with it. But the government forcing this down our throats has been the bane of my existence for the last couple of decades. Ruthie Gorovich, a policy director at the Climate and Community Institute, bemoaned the movement's new reality under Trump. With just one election and one bill, most of the signature climate work that organizations, advocates, and movements have been working towards is largely undone. Perhaps unwittingly saying the quiet part about the government-forced nature of his own movement out loud. Ding, ding, ding. This, without government interference, would be nothing more than a bunch of pinheads out on the fringe, wailing and moaning and gnashing of teeth, because most Americans do not care about this crap. And most people in all Western society do not care about the environmentalist wackos and their zealotry. But governments, both from here in the States and all over the EU, is forcing this garbage down everybody's throat. making life worse. Look at the brownouts in California that happen consistently because they replaced solid, reliable, old-fashioned energy with green garbage that is not reliable. And then they want to blame other things for their electricity issues and woes. It's always the case. This crap is never as good because it wouldn't survive on its own, but they force it down our throats. Now, someone really should inform these leaders of the modern environmental movement that they live in a constitutional republic which holds elections every 4 years. Damn it. Trust me, if they could get rid of people's ability to decide where they go, how they live, and who's in power, they would end it in a heartbeat. Now, if your movement's signature work, the article goes on to say, is based almost entirely on a single massive power grab by a single federal agency and a single overreaching bill signed by a single-term president, then yes, a single election can undo it all fairly rapidly. The pain is especially hard for groups who beefed up staff based on the promise of millions, perhaps even billions of dollars coming in from all the grants that were shoved out the door at the EPA and Department of Energy in the final weeks of Biden's presidency, aka President Vegetables. Now, faced with the effort by Zeldin to claw back $27 billion of such grants, Rewiring America cut 28% of its staff recently. $27 freaking billion we gave to these environmentalist wackos. What are we thinking here? Save the environment. Now, the $27 billion in grants were handed out under an IRA-established greenhouse gas reduction fund, a huge pot of money the Competitive Enterprise Institute described as an EPA slush fund that requires the agency to create slush funds for nonprofits. It's all a money laundering scam, by the way. That's how you get donations back to the Democrat Party, by giving it to these lunatic wackos. And oh no, Donald Trump took it away. Now, deprived of those funds, the climate alarm nonprofits find themselves in a heap of unfunded trouble. The question for these groups now becomes one of finding the best way to shift tactics. The Times quotes billionaire and former Democratic presidential contender Tom Steyer as writing on Facebook that if we want to win, we need a fundamental recalibration. Climate can no longer be a separate cause. There must be the context for making people's lives better. It has to feel like relief, like opportunity. And that, my friends, will be an impossibility. Because climate policy is all about destroying the economic engine of freedom that powers all Western democracies. Oil, my friends, no matter how much you want to cry and moan and bitch, that is the crux of the wealth and success of all Western societies. Take that away, and we don't have much left. There's no way that you can restrict energy like this and make people's lives better. It is an impossibility with current technology. Maybe somewhere down the road, but in the meantime, no. Now, to do that, meaning to make people's lives better, I guess, they will need to inform residents of tiny towns like Taft, Texas, how those hundreds of giant windmills surrounding their city represent a relief and opportunity. In other words, scar the land with garbage windmills that you can't even recycle, and that's good for you people. Now, this seems like a big lift, one that only seems larger without all those gold bars from the government to help pay for it all. And that's, my friend, is the bottom line here. If the government stops funding these nut jobs, this whole movement is going to implode on itself, which, I don't know about you, but that makes me so happy. I have hated this movement since it began being forced down our throats, and especially after the endangerment finding. It's been a no-holds-barred into interfering with our lives at every stage that they can. And it's never ending. I mean, in California, there are so many restrictions to devices that you can use. Everything's garbage. This green tech is just so annoying. So I am thrilled by this. It's a promising move by the Trump administration, and I hope they go after states that have been using the endangerment finding as a way to continually restrict the state's citizens from living their lives the way they want to. So good times all around. Let us hope that this trend continues.